the presentation again. All right, so thankfully we had this issue in the beginning. So while I was talking about the most uninteresting part, that's about me. So yeah, you can feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn or Twitter. And then, as I said, the expectation for this session is to lay down some basics around B2B commerce, B2C commerce. How do you actually get started? What are the various key terms in B2C commerce? And then eventually we'll do a recap, and I'll open up the floor for some questions and answers. I also have prepared a short quiz just to keep things interesting and just to make sure that people listen to what I speak. And I believe we have a prize for the quiz winner, and that's a certification voucher. I'll let Anuj speak to more details about that before I start the quiz. But let's dive deep into it. So first of all, thank you. Thank you for taking the time on a Saturday to come and listen to B2C commerce. You could be watching a movie, you could be watching Netflix, or you could be chatting with your boyfriend and girlfriend. So rather than doing that, thank you for spending time learning something. We often talk about these days that the world is going through an unprecedented time. So most of us cannot step out of our houses anyway. So I think the more you can make use of these times while it lasts, the better it is for your own gains. So a lot of sessions that you will attend will be typically like this, and it's even harder for speakers to kind of keep people engaged. And I obviously cannot see who's dozing off and who's falling off their chair or leaning on their beds. So what we'll try and do is to keep things interesting. Use the chat at any point of time, any question that you have. And again, there are no bad questions. There are only bad answers. And towards the end, I'll reserve about 5 minutes or so to go through all the questions, and I'll take a shot at answering all of them. So at any point of time, if you have questions, please do not wait till the end and type your questions, and I'll get to them towards the end. A little bit about me. Yeah, I like to say that I'm married to Salesforce since 2007. It's been a long time since I started working on Salesforce, and it feels a different era now. I mean, back then in 2007, there were, to put things in perspective, there were the Indian Salesforce community was less than 500 people. And now I think it's even difficult to estimate. Maybe yeah, huge numbers. I used to be a certified instructor, which meant I taught Commerce Cloud for partners and customers in Asia. I'm an Einstein champion because that's one thing which I really like towards where the world is heading with the potential of AI and ML. Since I've been around a long time, so I've had some good exposure and managed to do some certifications. And as I said, I work for MTX, which is a Salesforce and a MuleSoft partner. Who's in the audience? Again, I cannot see you, so I'll just request if you can type it out in the chat, depending on which category you are in. If you are a developer, and I really love developers, I myself am very hands-on. I like to code every day. Developers are people who always say it's not a bug, it's a feature. This is the best line of defense any developer has, and I've used it several times when I used to do active development. I'm not sure if there are any designers in the house, but yeah, B2C commerce and in general any web application, there is a strong design aspect to it. So in most B2C commerce project teams, you usually have designers. Designers are people who usually talk in terms of styles and CSS. And one typical style that we see thanks to the lockdown is obese, where at least that's what I've been experiencing, where my overflows are now clearly visible. And I'm really hoping things get back to normal soon and we all can be fit and healthy once again. And then the third category is administrators or business users. These are people who kind of keep the things moving along. And if they are not happy, then it means you do not build a good product and your customers are not happy. And if your customers are not happy, then you are in trouble. So in short, B2C commerce, there are a number of stakeholders. Each one of them is equally important. And with that context, let's explore the world of e-commerce a little bit. So it has completely transformed the way we shop. and these stats I pulled off from Salesforce presentation, which I did at Dreamforce with their performance engineering team. So almost more than 50% of e-commerce traffic is from mobile. So it's very few scenarios that you'll actually need to open your desktop or your laptop to actually order something from any e-commerce site. There is 100% growth in social commerce. What does social commerce mean? If somebody buys a product and they put it on Facebook, Twitter, or LinkedIn, and it kind of influences user behavior. And then more than 50% of stores in-store sales are influenced by digital. So what we typically do, and this is a very common mentality amongst Indians, is we always look for the best price, right? So we will look at Amazon, we'll look at Flipkart, and then we'll go and walk into the store and tell the shopkeeper that this is what Amazon is offering, and why don't you give me a better discount? So that is the way e-commerce is kind of growing, and it's only going to get bigger and bigger. And then 25% purchases span multiple touch points, which typically means that you either saw the product on your phone or on your laptop while you're casually browsing, and then you used a different device to order it, maybe an Apple Watch, maybe a smartphone, a tablet, or something else. Um, what is the difference between B2C commerce and B2B commerce? So I'll actually open this up to the audience. Anybody wants to talk to the difference about what do you mean by B2B commerce and what do you mean by B2C commerce? Any examples that you want to give me?
Yes, Gaurav, this is Manish here. So, when we talk about B2B and B2C, B2C is like business dealing with the end customer directly, and B2B is more like selling your product to another business. Like if I want to sell some telecom product to, let's say, McDonald's,
Hmm.
so that becomes B2B.
Hmm.
And if I want to sell my business to you directly, that becomes B2C. So that's
Great answer. So if this was a in-person meetup, I would probably give you a T-shirt for that answer. But since we are virtual, so consider this as a virtual hug from my side. So you described it very well, and we can see this in the image as well. That B2C commerce is when you as a business are selling to the end customer, the end consumers. B2B is more like there is a chain of entities. You sell to another business, which in turn sells to their own customers. So Amazon, for example, you would think that it's a B2C e-commerce marketplace. While that is true, there is a B2B aspect to it as well, because on Amazon there are sellers as well which sell to other sellers, and those sellers in turn sell to the end customer. So B2C is typically about the end consumer. B2B is about more about distributors and about volume games. So you would typically order like 1,000 units of a product, and then you would charge a premium on those and then sell to the end customers. So this particular session, I'll focus more on the B2C aspect of e-commerce. Let's talk a little bit about the Commerce Cloud architecture. So the Commerce Cloud architecture, in a sense, is very similar to some of the other secondary clouds that Salesforce has. So at the bottom layer, you have what we call as platform operations, where the key principles of Salesforce, like a multi-tenant architecture, reliability, security, and a global release model. So I'll actually ask another question here. What is multi-tenant architecture? Can somebody else answer that for me?
So multi-tenant architecture says that you're kind of sharing a space with multiple people. It's a common space that is shared by multiple people who host their data and host their sites there and are using the same architecture.
Yeah, great answer. Yeah, so multi-tenant is basically everything is shared. So you are all tenants on a shared space, and then all the resources are shared, but they are logically segregated. So on top of that, we have a retail data model, which includes what we call as, and to draw analogies, and I'll do that most of the time on pretty much every slide. So you can draw parallels between Salesforce and B2C commerce. So you get a shared view of objects, objects like order, inventory, product, price, customer. These are what we call as standard objects, or you can also call them as system objects. Then what Salesforce has done really well in the last couple of years is they've introduced this new layer called Commerce Cloud Einstein, which is bringing their AI capabilities into B2C commerce. They do it in two ways, which is product recommendations. So what Einstein would do, what the Einstein connector for Commerce Cloud would do is it would look at your past purchasing history, and then it will actually give a probable score to each of the product or each of the deals that you're offering in terms of what the customer is most liable to buy or what the customer is most likely to buy. Predictive emails, again, based on your past behavior, based on how you interact on the store, based on how many products you see, whether you typically buy the cheapest products or whether you buy the products which are most popular, it would actually send you predictive emails and help you find the right products. And then there is an integration layer which we call as OCAPI. It stands for Open Common API interface, and that's again an open standard which is used by a number of e-commerce players. And on top of that, we finally have all the touch points. So you can either order through a tablet, you can walk into a store, you can do it through your consumer, you can actually call a call center, kiosk, and then there are several other modes. So all in all, it's a hierarchical layered architecture, and I'll come to that in a little bit more. But let's first understand what is the physical architecture of Commerce Cloud. And again, drawing parallels to Salesforce, we have a number of what we call as data centers, similar to the data centers that Salesforce has. On each of those data centers, we have something which we call as a pod. So a pod is basically referring to a point of delivery. So for example, a pod could be located in Asia, a pod could be located in Europe, a pod could be located in America. Um, Based on what I've told you, can you tell me what would be the equivalent of a pod in a Salesforce environment? I've told you the geographies. So what would be the equivalent?
Instances, maybe.
Very good. Very good. So typical NA45, NA1, EU07 or something like that. So that's your logical segregation of where your physical segregation of where your data is kept. Then we come to the concept of realms. A realm is basically a logical segregation. So for example, if I am a customer, Nike is a customer, Nike would have its own realm on B2C commerce. If Adidas is a customer, Adidas would have its own realm. And I quote these because these have been some of the biggest customers of B2C commerce. And similarly, each customer on B2C commerce would have their own realm. Again, based on that, can you tell me what would be equivalent of a realm in the Salesforce world?
Pod.
Yes. So your org is basically your logical view, your logical segregation in a multi-tenant Salesforce architecture. Similarly, realm is your own logical segregation in B2C commerce world. Then we have what we call as a primary instance group and secondary instance group. These are all the instances that you get up as part of your realm. So in the primary instance group, we have three instances: development, staging, and production. Production is obviously where you make all the changes as a developer. No, right? So as a developer, you never make changes directly in production, no matter how harmless it seems. And just to give you some perspective, and don't quote me on this, on Friday, we had a development, somebody did a small change in production which seemed really harmless, and pretty much whole night yesterday until 5 o'clock today morning we were trying to figure it out, and then we figured out that yeah, this is something, and it was just a typo, and that's the reason you never make a change in production, otherwise it screws up your weekends. Staging is obviously, you also call it pre-production. That's where you would typically do a UAT. Development is not what it seems like. It is not where developers do the development. It is actually where testers do the QA. It's an old terminology that they are using. It's kind of a misnomer, but that's the terminology that they decided to stick with. Sandboxes, this is where as a developer you would do all your development. So typically as part of each realm, you get 5 sandboxes. And depending on your partner tier, you can request up to 50 sandboxes. The difference between sandboxes and between primary instance group and secondary instance group, let me ask you this. So what is the typical difference between your developer sandbox and a production environment in Salesforce? Anybody?
Various off limits are there, like
Data,
we
the
have
amount
a
of data which you
data
can store.
limitations, and we have like all the limits that we have for like say API limits in sandboxes are less, but in production we get more. That's kind of the differences that we get. Like all the
Exactly.
limits.
Exactly. So to summarize or to generalize, somebody said data, somebody said API limits. So to generalize, what you have in sandboxes, you have less resources as compared to a production environment. And B2C is again similar. On sandboxes, you typically have less CPU, less memory, but on production, these are much higher. So one of the key changes that I have observed, and I've been on the B2C commerce platform for several years, is it's increasingly focused towards mobile first. And I kind of lay the background on why that is happening, because a lot of people these days use e-commerce on their phones and tablets as opposed to a computer. So I picked this slide from a site which actually tracks the number of devices, and what this shows is there are more smartphones on planet Earth than the number of tablets. There are more tablets than the number of laptops, and desktops are pretty much on the verge of extinction. So it's very important that if you are developing a B2C commerce site or any site in general, that it renders well and gives a first class citizen experience on all form factors, especially on smartphones and tablets. Why is that important? Again, some slides I picked from stats I picked from a survey. 57% people would not recommend a business with a bad mobile site. 40% would turn to a customer, to a competitor, if they have a bad mobile experience, and 23% adults would use adjectives and curse the site, which I obviously cannot share here. But we all have done that. I mean, if a site is slow and we're not able to order the product, or if a deal is just closing out and it's not working for us, then we obviously try and look for a competitive solution. So let me walk you through how B2C commerce has evolved. So when it all started several years back, there was a company called Intershop. It was a German company. It then rebranded itself as Demandware. Demandware was a name which existed for several years, and Demandware is the company which Salesforce acquired back in 2016. They rebranded that company as they do with all the other products that they acquire. So they rebranded it to call it Salesforce Commerce Cloud, and developers typically abbreviate terms, so they started calling it SFCC, which stood for Salesforce Commerce Cloud. And again, it was a Salesforce product, so people started calling it Commerce Cloud. Everything was good until Salesforce acquired another company, which was called CloudCraze. This was in 2018, which is a B2B commerce solution. So now the problem was that if you referred to Commerce Cloud, nobody understood if you are calling it B2C or B2B or both. So then they started this renaming exercise again, and Demandware or Intershop or SFCC is now called as B2C commerce. CloudCraze, which was a B2B play, is now called as B2B commerce. And back in the days when it was Demandware, they came up with an architecture which was called Site Genesis. If you break down these words literally, it typically means the genesis of a site or how your site is evolved. The Site Genesis architecture worked well until a few years back, but then again, as design patterns and architecture as in general evolved, there were certain limitations that started to show up. So the biggest limitation was that it was built on proprietary technologies. Um, and again, on this slide, we have what we call as a typical MVC architecture. So can somebody explain to me in less than 30 seconds, what does MVC mean? Please just don't say model view controller. Just explain me what model does, what view does, and what controller does.
View is where you see the product, and from there you connect with it, and model is where you store the data, and controller is something which is helping you get that data back to your view.
Great answer. Yeah, so there are two reasons why I ask questions so many times. It gives me a break so that I can have some water, and then I can at least see that some people are awake and alive. So it's a tip. If you do a presentation, always ask questions. Okay, so again, going back to MVC, as described, model is where you typically store the data. View is your presentation layer, what the end user sees, and controller is basically where your business logic resides. There is also a component called service layer, which we often see in these diagrams. For simplicity, I did not show this. The problem with this architecture was that with Site Genesis, your view layer, and I'll show you this as well. Your view layer was very bulky. It used to use a framework called ISML, which is Interstore Markup Language, which was very bulky. In the sense that it was not very performance intensive. Um, Using a template essentially means that you define some template code, and that at runtime it generates HTML dynamically based on what parameters you pass. There was another problem with this framework, that models were not really representing data. We also had something called as D scripts, which was demandware scripts, which was basically alluding to models. So that is again not a pure MVC architecture. And most importantly, there was no separation of concerns. As a developer, you could pretty much, there were loopholes and developers love to exploit them. So you could pretty much write an application without following the MVC architecture. You could do everything you wanted. You could run JavaScript from views, and you could directly interact with the models, and you could do pretty much anything that you wanted. So this was not a scalable approach. This is what a Site Genesis site looked like, and I'll actually show you in a demo as well, and I'll show you some limitations of it. With these limitations, what Salesforce did after they acquired Demandware was they looked at top 200 sites that Demandware had, and then they came up with a new architecture, which they initially called as MFRA, which was Mobile First Reference Architecture. The reason for doing that was Site Genesis did not work very well on smartphones and tablets, and they wanted to indicate a paradigm shift, which was towards a mobile first architecture. So they called it MFRA, but then the confusion arose that it's mobile first. So will it really render well on my desktop or my laptop? So they standardized on a different naming convention and started calling it SFRA, which is a storefront reference architecture. A storefront means an e-commerce site. This is a more pure MVC architecture. It's built on the modern Salesforce framework. Again, from a high level, it's very similar to what Site Genesis was, but there are certain nuances which allow it to be more scalable. And most importantly, they've added a tool chain which allows developers to do rapid customizations, and you can pretty much get a site up and running in few weeks, and then you can update it fairly easily as well. The difference here is that it's a pure MVC implementation. So your model is only storing data. Your views are only doing what they're supposed to do in terms of a presentation layer, and your controller and the service layer actually handle all the business logic. This is what a SFRA site would look like, and I'll again show you this shortly as well. Let me actually now show you what a typical B2C commerce site looks like. And I've been logged out, so I'll just log back in. So once I log in, this is very similar to the web interface that you would typically log into your org. So anytime you log into a B2C commerce sandbox, you will come to this interface, which we call as Business Manager, or abbreviated as BM. Anytime you log in, it shows you what is the latest release. And the convention here is different. We don't really follow the summer, spring, winter. It's much simpler here. 20.4. Can anyone guess what this refers to? It's not intuitive, but make a guess.
20.
2020 fourth quarter.
Yeah, close enough. So 2020, and then 4 is the month. So we have a major release every month. So this sandbox is running currently on the April release. And again, there are multiple releases that happen every month. So I'll just skip this for now. So this is the Business Manager interface. There are 3 main areas here we call as merchant tools, which is typically what a merchant would use. A merchant is somebody who would basically decide what kind of products are shown, how do you create your menus, how do you lay out the products. Administrator is somebody who would get the site up and running, and typically developers would also use this section. And storefront, I'll actually show you what this is. So what you will typically do is you would if you are working on multiple projects, you would have multiple sites here. You would pick a site, and if I launch the storefront here after picking a site, it will show me my sample SFRA e-commerce site. So this is what it looks like. It prompts me for a tracking consent, which is essentially that it stores cookies and whether I'm okay with it or not. And once I'm okay, this is the interface which I'm shown. So you see a search window, you see some menus, and within those menus, you see some sub-menus, and then you see some categories. So let me actually show you how this site works. So let's actually look at a specific product. So if I go to a category and a subcategory, I come to a page which shows me a listing of a number of products. This is showing me a list of products, and this is what we typically call as a PLP, also called as a product listing page, because what it shows me a list of products. And on the left hand side, we have what we call as search refinement. So I can actually pick what kind of a television I want. I just want a flat screen TV, and my budget is, I'm not a rich man, so my budget is, yeah, there are no there are no products in this one. So I'll need to increase my budget. Okay, so yeah, something is not right with the test data, but the idea is you can actually filter based on specific products. I'm a Sony fan, so hopefully it shows me only the Sony products. And then if I click on any of the products, it takes me to the details of that product. And this is what we typically call in e-commerce technology as PDP, a product detail page, where you see all the images, where you see the pricing, where you see all the attributes, description, details, and then you can add the product to your cart. As soon as you do that, you can see that this is in your cart, and then you can check out as well. So there are essentially two types of shoppers. One who would come in, so for example, I'm looking for a suit. I would shop around, and what we typically call as window shopping, I'll look at 10 products and then I'll pick one of the products. The other category is what we call as surgical shoppers. So they are similar to surgical strikes. These people exactly know what they want, and what they'll come to the site, and what they'll do is they'll basically use the search. They'll see what product it is. So I really want a laptop briefcase which has wheels. So if I do that, rather than taking me to a product listing page, it directly takes me to the product detail page. I can add to cart, I can check out, and then boom, I'm done. Okay, so this is from an end user perspective. And then there are typical operations of cart. And what all I'm doing right now is, as a guest user, I did not sign in anywhere on this site. I can sign in and I can register on the site as well. That's another operation which I can do. And very similar, you can check out based on an order. There are a number of billing options, shipping options that you can configure. So those are all end user. From a developer perspective, what is really important for you is understanding how do you actually debug if you are working on such a site. So for that, we have what we call as this little box, which is called as Storefront Toolkit. Similar to your debug logs that you have, or the developer console that you have in Salesforce. For a B2C commerce developer, this is your best friend. There are a number of options you can actually see here by clicking each of the options. So for example, on any web application, you typically cache a certain amount of data. So if I want to see what data is being cached here, I click on cache information, and then these small icons, arrow icons, start showing up. And if I hover over this actually shows me that this is coming from a controller, which is page. It is rendering a template called menu.isml, and it is cached till a certain point of time. Similarly, if I go to certain other sections, for example, if I go to cart, it shows me that this particular functionality is actually not cached. If you see closely, this is actually crossed out. Can anyone tell me why we should not be caching a user's cart? based on what you know of e-commerce or Amazon or any other site? As a developer, can you think of a reason why we should not be caching the cart?
I think it should always be uh, the latest one, whatever we have in the cart.
Why?
Otherwise,
Mhm.
yeah, it would create like a lot of problems, right? I would have added a product and I'm not able to remove it, or I'm not able to see the new product. So I think,
Yeah,
yeah.
great answer. Yeah. So yeah, the last thing you want to do is if the customer added 10 products and within seconds they removed 9 products, but you had all the 10 products in the cart, and you bill the customer for 10 products, that very moment you lose that customer. And then there is a legal aspect to it as well, that a customer's preferences in terms of his shopping are what we call as sensitive information. So again, in certain geographies from a legal perspective as well, you cannot really cache this. So again, instead of cache information, if I want to see, for example, page information, so what typically happens is at the end of the day, this is all HTML, CSS, and JavaScript being rendered. And obviously, if I navigate, so let me show you. So if I navigate to a different page, what really happens is the top part of the page remains the same, the bottom part of the page remains the same, only the middle part of the page is changing. So even if I don't know anything about e-commerce, if I'm a web developer, the way I would design this is I would create this as a separate HTML page, I would create this as a separate HTML page, I would create this as a separate HTML page, and then reuse the header and footer in a single page, rather than creating it multiple times for each of those pages. So if I want to look at what specific element on any page, what controller and what template or what page is it actually referring to, then I can use this page option. I can use search option as well, which typically shows me what kind of search data I can. You can basically emulate a user, and then you can search for specific products. You can do a lot of information searching here as well. There is something also called as a site preview. Let me actually go to the home page. A site preview is, as I said, you can have different types of shoppers. So, for example, if you're on Amazon, you have Amazon Prime customers, you have regular customers. So, site preview actually allows you to emulate somebody who's a big spender, somebody who's a registered user, somebody who's unregistered, and then you can actually emulate how your site would behave on specific dates. So for example, Christmas or holiday season, if you're running a promotion, then you would typically have a higher traffic, or if you're launching specific campaigns, that would show up here as well. There is a lot of information that as a developer that you'll need to learn, and I'll share some resources around that as well. But in the interest of time, let me go back to Business Manager. So merchant tools, if you come here, you will see a lot of options here that typically a merchant or an administrator will need to do. Search, again, all the search related configurations are here. You would typically configure indexes so that your searches are faster. Products and catalogs. Products obviously refers to all the products. Let me show you a few of them. So if I come here, it shows me that I can search for specific products. If I don't enter a name or a ID, it basically shows me all the products that I have. And you can see that for a single product, I have so many variations. So size 10, size 12, so on and so forth. And again, I can actually see more products on a single page. This will probably kill my browser because there's a lot of products there. But the idea is you can actually look at the whatever data is there from a backend perspective. Similarly, you can look at catalogs. So catalogs is basically all the things that you were seeing on this site, all the categories, all the subcategories. So if I go to storefront, just look at the list here: new arrivals, women's, men's. These are exactly same as what we had here. So you can add new categories here. So for example, you want to add masks, which is a popular category because of coronavirus. You can actually add it here and assign products under that. So a lot of things that you can do. Administration, it says administration, but again, there are a lot of options here that a developer would use as well. So typical operations that you can do, you can manage your sites. You can, for example, if I want to bring this site down for maintenance, I can do that. I can configure my users. I can configure locales. I can configure a lot of operational aspects. I can view reports from here. I can configure background jobs. And trust me, I can talk all day about all these options. But just to give you an idea, administration is where administrators and developers would do a bulk of their operations. Merchant tools is where your merchants and some operations would be done by the administrators as well. So I do want to show one thing which might come up as a question, or might have already come up as a question, which is your objects. So similar to Salesforce, we have something which we call as system objects, or a standard object. And so again, one question: how would you view the structure of an object, or the definition of an object in your Salesforce org? Where would you go in your org? What option will you use to look at the structure of, say,
Schema builder.
Schema.
yeah, either one is fine, object manager or schema builder. So similarly here, if I want to look at what all attributes does my product have, so I'll come to system objects, I'll come to product, and I'll come to product attributes. And this shows me that a product has a name, a lot of manufacturer name, is new, dimensions, picture, battery life, and then certain fields here. So whatever you see here, which is logged, is basically a system attribute. You can actually add custom attributes here as well. And the other thing which you can also do is you can actually create your own custom objects as well. So again, the way you would extend the data model is very similar to Salesforce. You can add custom attributes to system objects, or you can create custom objects as well, depending on the use case that you have. Okay, so I think I'm a little bit behind time, so I'll go back to my deck now. And I really want to be respectful of Roshan's time as well. He's next up. So how do you learn Commerce Cloud? What I'll do is I'll share some links in the chat after my session. And again, Trailhead has a lot of good information. So my suggestion to you would be start with the basics. Start learning JavaScript, HTML, CSS if you don't know that sufficiently, and then try and learn some key basics like the data model of B2C commerce. How do you write a controller? There are a lot of videos available on YouTube about SFRA architecture as well. So go through them, and then it's a gradual process. And I'm sure it's easier to learn B2C commerce than to learn Salesforce if you come from a web development background. So I'll just leave that at that. Some of the biggest customers of B2C commerce, Puma, and most of the others are actually either from US or Canada. Not really terms that you all would be familiar with, but again, as I said, Nike, Adidas, these were again flagship customers. It is not just e-commerce customers. So for example, some of the biggest airports, they actually use B2C commerce for parking tickets. Gatwick does that. Heathrow, two of the biggest airports in London, they do that. And again, the use cases are kind of rapidly expanding beyond retail. So I presume this is the most important slide, and this is, I think, what most of you would have been waiting for. So if you learn B2C commerce, what is it for you, and what is the process to go about it? So I'll talk about B2C commerce first, and I'll just give an introduction about B2B commerce learning paths as well. B2C commerce, there are two certifications. One is a Salesforce certified B2C commerce developer, which is essentially you need to know how can you actually, given an architecture, how can you actually create a fully functional B2C commerce site? How can you debug performance issues? How can you do basic configuration? And then there is a second certification called Salesforce Certified B2C Commerce Architect. For this, it's a long battle, I would say. It's more of a war than a battle. You need to have at least a couple of years of experience working as a developer on B2C commerce sites. And then you should be able to appear for this exam. I do want to point one thing out that, and again, I'm not making this up. If you look at Artisan Hub, or if you look at any of the sites which share Salesforce certification statistics, these two certifications are two of the most difficult certifications out of the 32 certifications that Salesforce has. The number one reason for that is there are no dumps. Even if you try and find dumps, I will not encourage that. But even if you try and find dumps, you will not find them. And even if you find something, you can be rest assured that the questions that you'll get in the exam will be different. So a fun fact here that B2C commerce architect, there are less than 100 of these all over the world. And to put things in perspective, there are about 250, 220 CTAs and I think around 300 MVPs. So this is really tough, but it is like the pinnacle. So if you get to this level and if you aspire to be in the B2C commerce space, then this opens up a lot of career opportunities for you. B2B commerce, these are not certifications. I'm getting an echo, so if somebody can mute themselves. B2B commerce, these are accreditations. So the process is same. You give the exam on WebAssessor, it's proctored. Instead of a certification, instead of mentioning it as a certification, it mentions on your certificate as a accreditation. There are some resources for each of these, and as I said, in interest of time, I'll share those in the chat after I finish my session. A quick recap. So we learned about mobile first architecture. We learned a little bit about what Commerce Cloud is, the old architecture, Site Genesis. We talked about SFRA. We talked about some of the use cases. And then I'll share this deck. Exchange is basically a portal which has a lot of information, documentation on Commerce Cloud. I'll share the link. And then this is an intro of Commerce Cloud. Again, I'll share the deck so you have that link as well. All right, so with that, I'll actually jump over to the questions in the chat first, and then I'll come back.
Gaurav, I have noted the question from the chat. I'll read it out for you.
Sure.
Yeah. So first question we got from Umang. It's like mobile site versus mobile app. We need to put more efforts and how we can decide either we have to go with mobile app or the mobile site in terms of Commerce Cloud.
Yeah, good question. So unfortunately, B2C commerce does not actually have a mobile app. So it is only mobile sites, mobile responsive sites as of now. There have been discussions on the roadmap of building a mobile site, but I think given all the problems that Salesforce has had with Salesforce One and FSL mobile apps, I don't think they'll be launching a general mobile app. But the good thing is that there is something which we call as headless commerce, and what typically a lot of, and you can search this, and headless commerce is basically you can actually build your own mobile apps. You can use your website pretty much as a web view embedded into your mobile app and use everything that you have built, your controllers, model, everything that you have built can be wrapped around in a mobile app. It's just that B2C commerce does not provide a mobile shell like they do in case of Salesforce One or an FSL. So you need to develop that piece by yourself. Can we move to the next question?
Yeah. The next question is how we can sign up for a B2C dev org.
Yeah, so unfortunately, I wish I had a really good answer for this. Being a Salesforce developer is like a blessing. You can spin up 1,000 orgs and they'll charge you ₹0 for that, or whatever currency, zero for that. But B2C commerce, it's not that simple. It is only restricted to partners. So unfortunately, you need to work for a partner to get access to a B2C sandbox. The other option is if you attend one of the Trailhead Academy classes on B2C commerce, then you get a sandbox which is assigned to you for 3 weeks. That should be enough for you to pass the developer certification. 3 weeks is a good enough time. But if you are neither a partner and you do not attend a training, then there is unfortunately no way to get a sandbox. Yeah, it's unfortunate. The entry barrier is a little bit high, but that's what it is.
The next question is by Asmit. So does customizing these kind of pages in Commerce Cloud a part of drag and drop? So like when you're demoing the pages or the product listing pages, so it's a part of drag and drop or it's a development behind this?
Yeah, so again, the overall philosophy is similar. What we call as no code, low code, high code. We have a tool called Page Designer, which allows you to drag and drop elements, and then you can pretty much get your basic page design up and running with that. But you may need to write some code if you need some advanced components. So very similar to Salesforce, you have page layouts. You can do a lot of stuff by drag and drop. But if the requirements are somewhat custom, then you need to write some code.
Okay. This question is by Maninder Singh. Like any example of the company who is using Commerce Cloud? So we have already said like Adidas, Puma,
Yeah,
right?
so I'll just quickly show you one link, and if you search Commerce Cloud case studies, there are about, I think, 500 of these, and then you can segregate them based on verticals or based on specific geography as well. So as I said, Puma is a huge success story, and then what you can do is, yeah. So if you search from here, you will be able to find, for example, which specific. So Adidas, Puma, as I mentioned, and then you can actually look at various verticals here as well. So a lot of good case studies available.
Next question is by Umang. Like, do we have some config like record types for the data model in Commerce Cloud, and how the security is?
Yeah, so security, typically you have roles similar to how you have that in Salesforce. And then we don't call them permission sets, but you can typically define within a role what all permissions a specific user have. Uh, Record types, we don't really have a notion of record types, but it uses a separate terminology. So in products, you can define what we call as bundles, kits. The idea is similar, but just the terminology is different. So it is there, but again, the terminology is a little bit different.
Yeah. Next, by Sonali. How can we target discounted price or a special offer for a set of customers based on their native interaction with the site? Is there any way we can target surgical shoppers?
Yeah, so there are two parts to that question. So you would typically create a campaign, and when you create a campaign, you would define what is the set of users that you want to target for that specific campaign. So those set of users could be that this person has been looking at say a specific category, which is iPhone. So he's probably an Apple fanboy. So you would typically launch a campaign and do a promotion based on that. How do you target a surgical shopper? What you typically do is when you define your products, you ensure that you define indexes on the most common attributes that a user can search the product on. So for example, if I want a um, uh, blue colored shirt which is from a specific brand, um, I would basically put an index on the color. I would put an index on the color, and I would also create a composite index so that it's easier to find. And once I do that, it will actually show up here as a product when I search for that specific product. So that's how we would typically target surgical shoppers. And then there are a lot of things. So if I want that just from Google, a person should be able to go direct to that page, then I would define the appropriate SEO keywords and the meta tags as well for that.
Yeah, so now we'll take two more questions and then we'll move. Like if
Sure.
you have anything, we'll like take it offline. So
Sure.
one is like, can we use or combine Einstein Analytics with the Commerce Cloud? If yes, then how effectful it is?
At the moment, there is no direct connector available between Einstein Analytics and I am not sure if I understood the question, but there are. So again, this is one of the most common confusions that people have in Salesforce, is that you have Einstein Analytics and then you have the Einstein platform. Einstein platform is where the AI capabilities come in. So where basically you want to make predictions and help people take better decisions. Einstein Analytics is basically when you want to run some analytics on certain data. So this integrates with Einstein platform through the connector that I showed in one of the slides. It does not actually have a direct connection with Einstein Analytics, but there are a lot of inbuilt analytical capabilities. You typically do not need Einstein Analytics. There is also what we call as similar to App Exchange. We have something that we call as a link marketplace. So if you go there and search for analytics solutions that you can use with B2C commerce, then there are a lot of third-party solutions that you can use. Anuj, any more questions I need to answer now, or shall we move to the quiz?
Yeah, we can move. If any questions will be there, I'll note it down. I forward it to you.
Yeah, I see some of them in the chat. So what I'll do is I'll try and answer those after I do the quiz. But yeah,
Yes.
since the quiz is the most important, most interesting part. And can you tell people what is the quiz all about?
Yeah.